On this episode of Service My Ride, I'm going to replace the rear drum brakes using just common hand tools. We will be replacing the wheel cylinder, we're going to need a set of brake shoes, and we're also going to be replacing the brake drum as well. And as always, it's best to get yourself a set of gloves. So the first thing we need to do is chock off the front wheel. Also make sure that the car is in park if it's an automatic, or neutral if it's a manual, and make sure that we release the handbrake. So now you can grab your breaker bar and loosen all 6 wheel studs. Now go under the car with your jack and place it directly on the diff, lifting it from the centre. And then you want to place your jack stands either side to hold the car nice and secure. Once you have your jack stands in place, lower the jack, and then as an extra step of safety, lift the jack back up just so it's making contact with the diff, so it's an extra point of support. Now that the car is safe and secure up on the jack stands, we can now continue removing the wheel. Now the brake drum can be a little bit difficult to remove, so grab your hammer and give it a few taps around the outside, making sure not to hit a wheel stud. So you've now given it a few hits with the hammer and it's still not coming off. If you have a look on the side of the drum, you'll see 2 holes. Now if you've got stubborn drums and these haven't been off in a long time, you may need to insert a bolt into these holes and tighten the bolt up, and that will release the drum. And the bolt that I'm using here is an M8 bolt, and it's also 40mm long. And keep winding these bolts in until it releases the drum. Now that the drum has broken free, we can now remove the drum. And one of the reasons why your brakes might be squeaking is all this dust that's sitting inside the brake drum. This is normally caused from the old brake lining, or it's also from the rust inside that when we've hit it with the hammer, it's broken all that rust free. And this stuff you do not want to breathe in, so sweep this up and pop it in the bin straight away. Down the bottom here we're going to have the anchor spring, and the next one up is the parking brake lever, and the spring to the side, that is the parking brake cable. And this long spring that runs up the side, that is the shoe lever spring, which runs up and attaches to the adjuster lever. And right up the top here we will have the wheel cylinder, and then on either side, on the left and the right hand side, we'll have a shoe hold down spring. And if we have a look around the back of the drum, you'll see the shoe hold down pin. So the first thing we're going to do is take off the shoe hold down springs, grab a pair of pliers from the front and push the shoe down spring in and turn it 90 degrees so that it releases the pin from the back. And then we can also do this on the other side as well. Next up, we want to remove the shoe lever spring. So grab it with your pliers and lift it off the adjuster at the top and then pull it straight out at the bottom. And by using a small flat-headed screwdriver, we want to remove the anchor spring down the bottom. And that's all that's holding the shoes into place. Now we can remove the shoes from the drum. We just want to then disconnect the handbrake cable from the bottom of the shoe. Now with the wheel cylinder, we only want to replace it if it's leaking out either sides of the boot. And to remove the wheel cylinder is very simple. If we jump around the back, it's only held in by 2 bolts. We also have the brake pipe connection that is connected to the wheel cylinder, and right up the top is the bleed valve. So grab yourself some paper towel and place it in behind, because when we remove the wheel cylinder there will be brake fluid coming from that brake pipe. So first we want to loosen the nut on the brake pipe, and you only want to release the brake pipe so that you can undo it the rest of the way by hand. We can then remove the 2 bolts on either side holding the wheel cylinder into place. And then the brake cylinder should slide straight out. And make sure that you remove that yellow cap before reinstalling the wheel cylinder. And the process is exactly the same to put it back on, but in reverse. So first you want to slide it in and just get that brake line feed into place, and then we can hand tighten the 2 bolts to hold the cylinder into place. And the torque settings for the 2 bottom bolts is 16 Newton meters. Once we've got the wheel cylinder nice and secure, we can now tighten up the brake pipe. Now we can use the paper towel just to clean up any of that brake fluid that we may have spilt on the back of the backing plate. On the backing plate you're going to see 6 friction points, 3 down either side. We want them to be nice and clean, so first we're going to grab our wire brush. This is where the shoes make contact to the backing plate, so we want to clean that up to get rid of all the debris. And once we've cleaned down all the 6 points, we can also do the wheel hub as well. And once you're finished, grab your brake cleaner and spray it all down nice and clean. Once you've cleaned the backing plate down and all the friction points, we can now start reinstalling the brake shoes. Now you'll need to identify with the brake shoes which is the front shoe and which is the back shoe. The back shoe will have a little nipple up the top that we can attach the parking brake lever to. Once you put the parking brake lever on, we then want to reinstall the wave washer. We can then put the retainer clip using a pair of pliers and squeeze either ends of that clip so that it's nice and tight. Now that the parking brake lever is reinstalled, we now want to turn that brake shoe over. Now we can install the auto adjuster and the piston spring. And the piston spring is going to be extremely tight, so if you can get another set of hands to give you help, it'll make this a lot easier. And we now want to install the adjuster lever. Place that onto the nipple of the front spring and then we want to use the snap ring to hold it into place. Now before reinstalling the shoes, we want to make sure that the pistons on the wheel cylinder are facing up and down. Now on the backing plate where those contact points are, we want to add a small amount of anti-seize. That'll also give it some lubrication for when the brake shoes are sliding in and out. And also for next time when we want to try and take our drum off, we're just going to put some anti-seize around the wheel hub just to stop that rust welding. So now we can grab our brake shoes and reinstall them. And we want to make sure that the brake shoes sit firmly in the wheel cylinder at the top, and down the bottom there will also be a connection where the brake shoes will sit in nice and tight. And to hold these brake shoes into place, we're going to use our shoe hold down springs. So by inserting the pin from the back, we can now attach the shoe hold down spring from the front. Make sure we get our set of pliers, and we want to turn it 90 degrees to lock it into place. And we want to do the same on the other side as well. We can now return the handbrake cable back into the park brake lever. And to get this parking brake cable back into place, we need to pull the spring back so that we can slide it over the brake lever and make sure that it's pushed right down into the lever. Perfect. Now we can install that anchor spring down the bottom. And the last spring that we need to install is the shoe lever spring. So hang it over the top of the adjuster and then use a pair of pliers and pull it down, locking it into place on the bottom of the front shoe. We want to make sure that the brake shoes at the top are sitting in the wheel cylinder, all the springs are connected properly, and the handbrake cable is sitting inside the park brake lever. Now we can return the brake drum and we can go around the back so that we can bleed the new wheel cylinder. Now if you didn't replace the wheel cylinder, there's no need to bleed the brakes, but you will need to adjust them. But first we're going to bleed the brakes because we have replaced the wheel cylinder. And to bleed the rear brakes is the same as the front brakes. And by using the hose, now we can open up the bleed valve and start pressing on the brake pedal nice and slowly. And this will fill up the wheel cylinder, pushing out all the air out through the bleed valve. So make sure you hold that hose up nice and high so that no air bubbles can get trapped back inside the wheel cylinder. And when you finish bleeding the brakes, make sure you put the dust cap back on the valve. Make sure you go into the master cylinder in the engine bay to top it up with brake fluid. So now that we've bled the brakes, we now need to adjust them. So by moving the plug on the back, that'll give us access to get to the auto adjuster. So as you can see here, this is the front view, which you can't see from behind. But what we're initially going to do is slide the screwdriver in onto the adjuster wheel and slightly turn it, and you'll hear the clicks. And you'll want to click it about 12 times, and what that does is push the shoes out to make contact with the drum. And by turning the adjuster, we are pushing the shoes closer to the drum so that there's minimal distance for when you apply the brakes that the shoes have to travel to reach the drum. And once you've finished adjusting the brakes, make sure you reinstall the plug on the back of the backing plate. And that is how you replace brake drums on your car. Now make sure you do the other side of the car as well. And once you're done, you can then put the wheels back onto the car, tighten the studs up as tight as you can by hand before we lower the car back to the ground. And once the car is back on the ground, we can then get our torque bar and tighten the bolts up to spec. And before we go for our test drive, we just want to make sure we've got some pressure under the brake pedal, so push it nice and slow to the floor until we get some pressure. Also, when you go for your test drive, make sure you drive nice and slow. Take your brake fluid in case you need to top it up if required. So get out there and give it a go.